In the previous chapter, after entering the ancient ruins, RECAPS and his crew encountered a peculiar monster rats that had electricity within them. And as they wonder what it was, a sudden voice started to talk to RECAPS. To RECAPS' surprise, it revealed to him that it was a spirit who is tasked to guard this place, and he is the only one who can see and talk to it, because only strong individual could see it, and RECAPS is one of them. So the stingray proposed to give the demonic power of electricity to RECAPS. However, because of RECAPS' new ability trickery, he had managed to smell the awful aroma coming from the stingray's mouth, and it was full of shit. So he immediately called out the stingray of its malpractice, and if it really wants a fair trade with him, it should change its tone and never lie to him. This caught the stingray off guard, and with the domineering presence on RECAPS, it quickly submits to RECAPS' demand. Now on to the next part. With RECAPS' threats loud and clear, the stingray bowed its head and apologized. In response, RECAPS told the stingray there was no need for apologies, just to remember this lesson for the future. With this, the electric stingray flew closer to RECAPS, but its fluttering seemed less powerful than before, and then told RECAPS the truth that it is actually sealed within this ruin. It can fly freely within this space, but is unable to leave. It wishes to be freed from this restraint, offering the power of electricity to whoever could liberate it. And RECAPS, understanding the situation, promptly inquired about what needed to be done for its release, to which the electric stingray explained that it was quite straightforward actually. If he goes down there and kill the one guarding its seal, it will become free, and so it can give him the power. This caught the interest of RECAPS, so he followed up asking if that means he would be able to do the zap thing that the rat monster did, to which the electric stingray enthusiastically confirmed. However, it clarified that he couldn't suddenly gain what the rats could do, as he still need to train the power by continuously using it. And then it becomes stronger. And the power it has is very strong, so it won't only go to him. Other than himself, a few others within his clan will get the power too, and its power can be passed down to his descendants. The progress in power he has made won't be directly passed down, but should his descendants continue to train their power like he does, some of those who share his blood may become stronger than him. This instantly amazed RECAPS. This prompted for RECAPS to willfully express his true thoughts, and asked about the elephant in the room, asking the stingray the exact reason it is trapped here. But just like before, it hesitated and stuttered as it answered RECAPS' question, explaining to him that it was because its power is too strong. People stay away from dangerous things like poison or monsters, and if they can't stay away from it, they trap it and put it away. With this, RECAPS' face hardened, and pointed out that it just admitted that its whole being is dangerous. This only gave RECAPS more of a reason to keep it contained, but he knew this wasn't the case, as he felt that this stingray is just stupid, so it just made an error while it actually attempted to hide something again. Or the harm is greater than the benefits of having that power, and the stingray was about to defend his case and try to lie its way out of the situation. But it remembered what RECAPS had just said, and so it immediately stopped itself from saying anything rash, and seeing that the electric stingray be mindful and respected his wishes, RECAPS decided to release the tension within them by admitting to the stingray that he still wants to have that power. So they should just start the deal from the top and called the stingray Zap. But this only confused it, so RECAPS clarified to it that he decided that will be its name from now on. To which the stingray tried to correct RECAPS that it is not named Zap though. In response, RECAPS explained that this was the start of his deal, with him choosing its name, as it tried to trick him. So the conditions have to be more favorable to him. Zap became sullen, and just responded with a soft okay, and it then inquired about his other conditions, which RECAPS answered as though it was self-evident, requesting Zap to clarify why it is considered dangerous, as RECAPS held the belief that if Zap truly possessed power worthy of a deal, there would be no need to conceal its dangerous aspects. Conversely, if there were reasons to hide its perilous nature, then it wouldn't be worth entering into a deal for. Zap hovered in the air, think for a little bit, and understood RECAPS' reasoning. So it then confirmed to RECAPS that its own power is worth taking a risk for. This is what RECAPS had wanted, so he asks what kind of risk it was talking about, prompting Zap to explain further, stating that it originated from an ancient evil, the ones who ruled over this world a long, long time ago. But it was so long ago that their existence was forgotten, and even the gods don't remember them either. Because of it, itself also can't recall its origin. One day it just found itself trapped here, and RECAPS understood Zap's feelings quite well, as he also grew up as an orphan. So he tells Zap that there's no need to know who it were born to be. What's more important is deciding what it'll do about the days ahead of it. Zap was a bit thrown off that it got comforted by RECAPS' words, but soon continued. Zap explains that a power of unknown origin is intoxicating to people, because the source is unknown. This allows one to believe that the power belongs to them, when in reality, they just happen to get it by chance. Once they start using such a power, they start to believe they deserve it. And once they start to think that way, they look down on the ones without power. Rakrak found it a bit difficult to understand, but nodded, remembering Boer's and Shunan's situations. And so it seems like the demonic magic also makes people become like that, which Zap confirmed, as its power spreads indiscriminately. Consequently, Rakrak tried to predict what would happen if he obtained this power. As this electrical demonic power seems different from something a god would give, God's power is only given to those God chose and at God's discretion. On the other hand, if someone is given a power like this without being deserving of it, others would become jealous and envious. And if that power grows greater and greater, there would be people who scorn God. And Rakrak then understood the reason why Zap was dangerous. This led him to ask Zap why should he take such a risk to have its power, which it immediately responded that it's because its power is strong. Still, it's also destructive. And as Rakrak was heavily thinking of what to do, Zap then demonstrated his power. With this, Rakrak immediately thought he had seen this kind of light from somewhere, and eventually realized what it was. It was like thunder and lightning. Rakrak assumed that the strength of the power determined the intensity of the light it produced. It could be just a small spark at first, but once the power grew and became stronger, it could become thunder and lightning. Rakrak also understood that it would be advantageous in battle if he could produce electricity from his body like the monster rats did. And so Rakrak admitted to Zap that it's indeed an appealing power, which made Zap delighted, promptly asking Rakrak if he made up his mind and set it free, to which Rakrak confirmed, but before that he has a condition that the stingray should fulfill. This intrigued Zap, so it flew towards Rakrak as if it expected Rakrak to say so and continued to talk, as it assumed that Rakrak wants to have the power for himself, which it won't judge as it was understandable for an individual to monopolize such power, but the process will probably be difficult. But it's possible. There are a few things he will need though. In order for one person to have its power, a ritual of the same level as the magic will need to be prepared. However, before Zap could continue further, Rakrak shook his head to convey that what it assumed was incorrect. He doesn't have any intention of keeping the power only to himself. Zap was taken aback and somewhat puzzled by Rakrak's line of reasoning, leading it to request further clarification. Rakrak highlighted that Zap had initially mentioned the power of electric demonic magic was distributed indiscriminately, but also noted the possibility of concentrating this power in one individual through a ritual. Rakrak reasoned that if both statements were true, it might also be feasible to selectively distribute this power to specific chosen individuals, rather than indiscriminately. Zap, still appearing puzzled, conceded that it hadn't experimented with this approach but believed it could be possible. A minor ritual might suffice. Although Zap was uncertain why Rakrak would want to do this, Zap reasoned that unless Rakrak monopolized all the power for himself, the outcome would essentially be akin to leaving it to chance. Rakrak, however, disagreed, asserting that the situation would indeed be different. If the power were bestowed only upon certain individuals, it would appear as though it was a deliberate choice made by a god. In other words, the power would no longer seem like an ambiguous force from an ancient evil with no identifiable origin, but would instead be recognized as a power with a clear source and purpose. But Zap just then pointed out that it's not God's choice though. This power isn't granted by a god. But Rakrak just slightly smiled, and told Zap that's not the important part. If people think it's God's gift, then it will be from that point on. What difference does that make? The chosen ones will think that God has given them the powers, and their faith and devotion will reach God. And Zap tried to argue against Rakrak, but couldn't think of anything to say. Because what Rakrak was saying was also true of the system of the lost world. If those who had demonic magic believed it was given to them by chance, there would be penalties in gaining faith points. On the contrary, however, if those who had demonic magic mistook it as a power given to them by a god, it would actually result in more faith points. And seeing that Zap was on the same page as him, Rakrak went ahead and told his second condition, surprising Zap as there were more. And so Zap immediately pointed to Rakrak that if he includes himself naming it however he wishes, this next one would actually be the third condition. But Rakrak didn't care about the numbering, as he just casually continued to his third condition. And seeing how determined Rakrak was, Zap just let him do what he pleases. In response, Rakrak cast his gaze towards Zap and told it that it needs to believe in God as well. This shocked Zap beyond belief, but before it could respond, Rakrak clarified that not just any god. It should trust and believe in their nameless beetle god. But as expected, Zap flashed in refusal. The other conditions are fine, but that will be hard for Zap, since it is a spirit of demonic magic. It was created from an existence that has been around longer than gods. Rakrak lightly hit his tail on the ground. The group who was with Rakrak noticed his discomfort and checked up on him. Joel asked if there was something wrong and if the pain in his hand was okay, and Rakrak simply said he was fine. Rakrak then focused on Zap and asserted that its origins, the hows and whys of its birth, were irrelevant. What mattered was its intentions and actions moving forward. RECAPS then questioned Zap on why it desired freedom. Zap replied with a straightforward reason. It was inherent to its nature. As a spirit of demonic magic, its primary goal was to disseminate demonic magic as widely as possible among various beings. This was the fundamental purpose of its existence. In response, RECAPS admits that Zap seemed useful enough to him, and their nameless beetle god happens to be generous towards useful beings, so it was possible that their god may listen to and fulfill Zap's desires. And the reason why it was made is not important, as they believe that the reason for one's own existence is determined by themselves, not by the one who created them. Zap then steadily slowed its fluttering, and told RECAPS that what he wants is impossible since gods do not like spirits of demonic magic. But RECAPS, who has an unwavering conviction, countered that Zap shouldn't judge their god through the lens it looks at the world with. And seeing the stern look on RECAPS' face, Zap inquired whether RECAPS' god would truly accept a being like itself, which RECAPS confirmed, provided that it accepts all the conditions he offered. And he reassured Zap not to worry. He may not know all of God's wishes, but he is the one who understands his wishes best among everyone who knows of him. And with this hidden ability of RECAPS, exuding infinite charisma through his eyes and voice ultimately swayed Zap's decision. Consequently, Zap chose to confess that it had actually lied to him about a few things. Zap revealed that it is not just simply trapped in this ancient ruin. It is true that a challenger of the ruin must defeat the ruin's guard, but that guard is under its rule. It controls everything in this ruin. Furthermore, Zap admitted to sending the demonic magic enchanted nutrias to them lizard men, which RECAPS feigned surprise at this revelation. But in truth, he was not taken aback. And he also understood the reason why Zap told him that he needed to defeat the guard, and that is because the power shouldn't be given to those who are weak, since they wouldn't be able to widely spread Zap's powers. And Zap confirmed this reasoning. And recently, the Frogmen tribe had also come to attempt the challenge. However, they didn't deserve it, which RECAPS thought that was obvious. Meanwhile, Zap was surprised that RECAPS was taking it well rather than before, and therefore, Zap quickly pointed out to RECAPS that it had deceived him and questioned why he wasn't more upset by this revelation. And RECAPS simply shook his head in response, as he had already anticipated the deception, and he was not the type of lizard man to become upset just because he was deceived without even losing anything. And he can always forgive when he wishes to, even though forgiveness isn't a virtue of a warrior, but he is also the tribal chief. And forgiveness and reconciliation are indeed virtues of a tribal chief. This surprised Zap, and now it found itself viewing RECAPS in a new light. But even before Zap could react further, RECAPS expressed that he understands where Zap is coming from, not as a warrior, tribal chief, or high priest, but as a lizard man and as an individual. Getting twisted isn't strange after living in a wet, dark place like this, always looking at monster rats, so it seems like it could use some fresh air outside and look at beautiful things. Zap immediately flashed with excitement, and RECAPS stopped walking and watched it. Then Zap inquired about his name, which RECAPS promptly responded, and with that, Zap addressed him by his name, and declared that the test is over. It will accept all the conditions he have offered, which made RECAPS delighted. At the same time, at Nebula's side of things, a system interface popped up, notifying him of a demonic magic spirit wishes to be subjugated to him. If he accepts, he will receive demonic magic area, electricity, which Nebula immediately clicked yes. And now it was done. Nebula felt a sense of satisfaction. This outcome was the best possible scenario he had hoped for. The key to circumventing the penalties associated with demonic magic lay in transferring it to the divinity area. Without this transfer, each individual imbued with demonic magic would be labeled as demonic magic enchanted and become uncontrollable. However, once demonic magic was housed within the divinity area, it could be managed and controlled effectively. This strategic move ensured a balance and maintainable use of this potent power. And just as Zap accepted RECAPS' conditions, it became feasible to bestow demonic magic upon select individuals. However, transferring this power to the divinity area did not transform it into divinity, nor could it be leveled up like other abilities in the divinity area. There were specific limitations to its use. Nonetheless, the absence of penalties was a victory in itself, and if breaking through the ancient ruin was all that was needed to be done to obtain demonic power, that would be more than worth it. RECAPS' group would win even if hundreds of those monster rats came attacking them. And if needed, Nebula could always support them by using faith points. However, subjugating a spirit of demonic magic was much more difficult to do. Nebula didn't even know if it would be possible. The only way to find out was to wait and see what would happen depending on each character's abilities. And Nebula seemed to have gotten lucky again and succeeded in doing so. However, Nebula didn't think this was mere coincidence. Meeting RECAPS seems to have been good luck for the both of them. suggesting a significant and potentially beneficial connection between them. After that, several days had passed. There were two figures standing at the top of a hill. Among the pair was a lizard man, proudly telling the story about how the blue insect god gave Rakrak the power of thunder and lightning. And this is the end of the story of how the Chosen Ones came to be among their black-scaled lizardmen tribe. And that was 9 years ago. The lizardmen told this as they were in front of a tower made from tombstones and water buffalo bones, stacked and assembled with plaster to build a structure tall enough to be seen from far away in the wilderness. This bone tower was built on top of the old one that Rakrak had first created, and was not only used as a way to show faith in the blue insect god, but also used as a milestone now. Finishing telling the long story, the black-scaled lizardman gently dusted one of the stone monuments. This lizardman wore expensive layers of a fabric called silk, which indicated he belonged to a high social class. But the man, on the other hand, looked shabby. On his head was a questionable piece of leather that didn't seem properly tanned, and he had a bushy beard. Still, the man was quite friendly with the lizardman, and thinks what he just told was an interesting story. But there was one thing that he can't wrap around his mind, so he pointed out that the god the lizard believes in is an insect god. So he doesn't get what does that have to do with thunder and lightning. And the lizardman just tilted his head. He didn't seem thrown off by the question, though. It was more of a tilt that questioned why this man would be asking about such a thing. Still, he answered the man by a question, asking it what color is the lightning, which the man answered blue. The lizard man then pointed out that their deity is referred to as the blue insect god. That's why. But the human did not understand what the lizardman meant by that. So he just begun to think that lizardmen are always convinced and swayed by the strangest things. They're so odd. This man didn't think being odd was necessarily a bad thing, though. But he was convinced that he might be able to take advantage of the fact that they're odd. Hiding his innermost thoughts, the man introduced himself as Hui, and then asked the lizardman what his name was, which the lizardman was about to answer. But he noticed something from the distance, so he promptly apologized for cutting their conversations short, as he think there's some uninvited guests coming over. At far below, there was a group of armed gnolls walking through the valley. This hyena-like species had protruding snouts and black spots on their brown bodies. They had rough tempers and were obsessive over power structures, so they fought frequently amongst themselves. But the overall opinion of the players of the Lost World was that they were still worthy of consideration despite all these shortcomings. Their physical ability and intelligence were both high on average, so they were known to be a good species to have at the start of the game, regardless of what the player's small area was. But these facts about the game had no bearing on the lizard man, and the man named Hui. The lizard man then asked Hui he thinks they are Salkite's men. Salkite was the tribal chief of the Gnoll tribe, also known as the Earcut tribe, which were hostile towards the black-scaled lizardmen. The black-scaled lizardmen from the south and the Earscut tribe from the northeast were the two largest tribes of the wilderness, so all the other smaller tribes had great interest in the two. Salkite and Rakrak believed in different gods. Therefore, it was inevitable for both tribal chiefs to be hostile towards each other. The man named Hui took great interest in whether the two tribes were going to fight, and if they did, who would win, excluding the human tribe, of course. At least within this specific wilderness, would be comparable to these two powerful tribes. But he decided to reply with a bit of sincerity. So the man took a closer look at the Gnoll group coming up the hill and came to a conclusion. He doesn't think they're Salkite's men, since it's strange that they would come to this area. If they were Salkite's men and part of the Earscut tribe, Rakrak would definitely know of them coming this way, and they wouldn't be wandering around here so fearlessly. And he thinks that these group of gnolls is just used to be part of Salkite's tribe, but were driven out because of infighting. That kind of situation is common for gnolls. They might look armed, but if they look closely, it's clearly a sham. That one doesn't even have a knife. He's just holding a wooden club, which the lizard man accepted Hui's explanation to be reasonable. But he thinks it's because they aren't cautious of their surroundings at all. If they were Salkite's scouting party, they would search the mountain ridge first, and wouldn't take that smooth path. They look tired and exhausted, so they are vagrants. And if they were a scouting party of the Earscut tribe, they would actually be friendly. They would know that getting into such a trivial battle is meaningless, and both scouting parties would rather have a meal together and try to get information from each other. In this context, the lizardman reached for an arrow. In doing so, he unveiled his true identity. It turned out he was Owen all along, and he was about to deliver the most electrifying greeting that the gnolls would die for.